Not only direct maltreatment, but witnessing violence between parental figures is important. Carol George and Judith Solomon note that this is a form of failed protection because violence against the caregiver is akin to violence against the self. Previous studies have reported correlations between witnessing violence and child behavior problems, but not with the controls that were used in the Minnesota study. Controls are important since a correlation can be obtained because children who witness domestic violence are also more likely to be abused themselves, and you want to know whether it's the witnessing, the experience of abuse, increased stress. Behavior problems might be the result of these factors and not witnessing violence per se. In fact, all of these variables were correlated with behavior problems in their study, and also with witnessing violence. Life stress correlated strongly with witnessing violence in the preschool years. Nevertheless, they were able to demonstrate a contribution of witnessing violence to behavior problems, even with all these variables and child IQ controlled for. For example, they found that witnessing parental violence in the preschool years was significantly, although modestly, correlated with internalizing and externalizing problems during adolescence. And the findings were stronger when both gender and type of problems were considered. For boys, witnessing violence in the preschool period predicted externalizing problems at age 16. While for girls it predicted internalizing problems. With IQ, SES, stress, child abuse, and neglect all controlled for, early witnessing of violence was still significant in predicting externalizing problems at age 16 for the total sample. In these analyses, witnessing violence in middle childhood was not significant. So witnessing violence in early childhood leaves a legacy that appears during the adolescent years, and this is particularly true for boys. Think about Chris Brown as an example. Chris Brown witnessed domestic violence perpetrated against his mother as a young child, and he swore that he would never ever do that because he'd witnessed it and he didn't like it. But the emotional dysregulation that occurred as a result of that violence that he witnessed ultimately put him on a pathway to engage in domestic violence against Rihanna. Other important contextual factors in predicting adolescent behavior problems centered on the role of men in the lives of the children. Adult male presence can be considered either as a risk factor if the frequent comings and goings of men were disruptive to family stability, or as a promotive factor if male presence was supportive of the child or mother. For example, a key variable in the literature with regard to adolescent behavior problems has been monitoring. That is, do the parents monitor and keep track of their teens' behavior and activities and companions, and do they step in when the behavior becomes too risky? They didn't have enough stable male presence to consider father monitoring alone in the Minnesota longitudinal study, but they did find that parental monitoring during adolescence was in general higher when there was a stable male presence. Higher monitoring was associated with lower behavior problems for boys. From a systematic review of the interviews with mothers on 17 occasions over the years, as well as 6 teacher interviews and 3 interviews with the adolescents, they constructed 3 key father variables that they then examined: disruptiveness of males in the home, supportiveness of the child by men, and family structure. The first 2 variables were summary ratings made for early childhood, middle childhood, and adolescence. In families that had a high score on disruptiveness, the mother was involved with multiple partners and there were numerous moves by men in and out of these children's lives. For families with high ratings on support, the man was available, attentive, and also involved with the child in an ongoing and supportive way. And the third measure was categorical, based on whether the child lived with the mother alone, the mother and the biological father, or the mother and a stepfather from age 3 to first grade. Disruptive male presence predicted adolescent externalizing problems most powerfully from the early childhood period. In addition, early childhood disruptiveness, that means men coming and going, accounted for additional variance in externalizing even after life stress and direct support of the child by the mother was controlled for. Direct support of the child by the available men, assessed in early and middle childhood and adolescence, all predicted lower externalizing. The combination of early disruption and low adolescent support was a strong combination, especially for boys. In general, stable, supportive male adults proved to be a positive influence for boys, but notably, unstable adult male presence was worse than no man being involved at all. They also found an interesting interaction between gender and family organizational structure. For girls, externalizing was highest when they lived in a stepfamily in the early years. For boys, externalizing was highest when they had lived with their mothers alone. Now, I know I just told you that no male presence was better than disruptive male presence, but this doesn't mean that boys living with single mothers didn't have any problems. Just that with a disruptive man in the home, it was actually worse. They also looked at additional supportive people, such as grandparents, other relatives, or family friends, and the quality of this other support was rated, as were any disruptions in that social support. These measures predicted peer competence and adjustment at various ages all the way to adolescence. So this is more support for the idea that supportive relationships are important in positive outcomes. For example, quality of support in early childhood predicted both lower internalizing and externalizing behavior problems at age 16, even after controlling for the quality of maternal care. This is a testimony to the importance of having a strong social support network, whether it's grandparents, aunts, or uncles, or other family members, teachers, coaches, church members, neighbors, you name it. Positive relationships can be a source of resilience, and they can compensate to varying degrees for problems in the child-caregiver relationship.